Society tells you a very specific lie. It tells you that if people keep misunderstanding you, then you must be doing something wrong. Too quiet, too intense, too sensitive, too complicated, too hard to read. But psychology says something much deeper. For some people, never feeling understood is not a personality flaw. It is the end result of years spent adapting to people who only listened to the version of them that was easiest to handle. If you have ever felt like people hear your words but somehow miss your meaning, stay until the end, because the real problem may not be that you are difficult to understand. It may be that you learned how to hide the parts of you that were hardest to accept. Once that happens, even the people closest to you can only meet a version of you. Not the whole thing, not the real thing, just the edited version. That is where the loneliness begins. Because most people think being misunderstood means nobody is paying attention. But that is not always true. Sometimes people are listening. They just do not know how to interpret what they are hearing. You speak in nuance. They hear certainty. You speak in pain. They hear attitude. You speak in humor. They hear detachment. You stay quiet. They call you distant. You finally speak honestly. They call you too much. So eventually you start learning a terrible lesson. No matter how you show up, someone will misunderstand the point. And once that pattern repeats enough times, you begin to stop speaking in your natural voice. You shrink your emotions. You translate yourself. You simplify your thoughts. You become easier to digest, easier to label, easier to overlook. And that is when misunderstanding stops being an accident and starts becoming a way of life. A lot of people who never feel understood grew up in environments where being fully seen was not safe. Maybe your feelings were dismissed. Maybe your reactions were mocked. Maybe your honesty was used against you. Maybe every time you tried to explain what was happening inside you, the room got colder, quieter, or more uncomfortable. So you learned to adapt. You became the observer, the one who watches before speaking, the one who reads the room, the one who hides the real reaction until later, not because you are fake, because you were trying to survive. And that survival strategy works surprisingly well. People begin to see you as calm, collected, hard to read, strong. But what they often do not realize is that calm is not always peace. Sometimes calm is camouflage. Sometimes composure is just a polite word for self-protection. You learned that if you reveal too much, people may not know what to do with you, so you reveal less. You offer the polished version, the easier version, the version that does not make other people uncomfortable. And when you do that long enough, people stop realizing how much depth they are missing. They think they know you because they know your public face. They know the laugh, the timing, the tone, the habits, but they do not know the weight behind your silence. They do not know how many thoughts you had to edit before speaking. They do not know how often you have already come to a conclusion before everyone else has even noticed there was a problem. That is one of the cruelest parts of being misunderstood. You are often far more aware than people assume. You see things they miss. You feel tension before it becomes visible. You catch changes in tone, behavior, and energy that other people do not register until much later. But because you do not announce every observation, people assume you are not noticing at all. So they underestimate you. And then when you finally do react, they act shocked. Where did that come from? Why are you so sensitive? Why are you taking it that way? Why did you not say something earlier? The answer is simple. You did, just not in the language they know how to hear. That is what makes being misunderstood so exhausting. It is not just that people miss your meaning. It is that they often miss your meaning while believing they understand you perfectly. That creates a special kind of loneliness, because you can be surrounded by people and still feel completely untranslated, like there is a whole interior world inside you that never gets permission to exist out loud. And after a while, that can make you start to doubt yourself. Am I too much? Am I too sensitive? Am I expecting too much from people? Am I the problem? That self-doubt is dangerous, because once you start blaming yourself for being misunderstood, you may begin to water yourself down even more. You stop saying the true thing. You start saying the safe thing. You stop asking for depth. You start settling for surface-level connection and calling it peace. But it is not peace. It is just loneliness with better manners. The truth is, many people who never feel understood are not impossible to know. They are simply loyal to a deeper inner world. They think in layers. They feel in layers. They process in layers. They do not want shallow comfort. They want accuracy. They do not just want someone to say, "I get it." They want someone to actually get it. And that is rare, not because people are cruel, but because most people are not paying attention with enough care to notice what is underneath the obvious story. They hear the words but miss the wound. They hear the explanation but miss the fear. They hear the joke but miss the sadness. That is why so many misunderstood people end up becoming highly selective with who gets access to them. Not everyone deserves the deeper version. Not everyone has earned the right to hear the full story, and that boundary is healthy. But there is a line between being selective and becoming invisible. If you have spent too long being misunderstood, you may begin to believe that being low maintenance makes you lovable, that being easy to handle makes you safe, that not needing much makes you easier to keep around. But that kind of thinking can quietly erase you, because the more you become the version of yourself that other people can tolerate, the further you drift from the version that actually needs to be known. And the cost of that drift is enormous. You become admired for traits that were originally coping mechanisms. You are praised for being calm when you are actually overloaded, praised for being independent when you are actually tired, praised for being strong when you are actually carrying too much alone. And because the outside world keeps rewarding the mask gets harder to take off. This is why being misunderstood can become addictive in a strange way. At least misunderstandings are predictable. At least when people do not get you, you know where you stand. But being truly seen is risky, because once someone understands you, they can also disappoint you in a new way. So the mind often chooses the safer pain. Misunderstanding over vulnerability. Distance over rejection. Self-editing over exposure. But there is another path, a harder one. The path where you stop trying to be understood by everyone and start looking for the few people who are actually capable of listening without immediately translating you into something small. That means speaking plainly, not perfectly, just plainly. It means saying what you mean before you convince yourself it is too much. It means noticing who responds with curiosity instead of defensiveness, who asks follow-up questions, who does not need you to become simpler in order to stay. Because the right people will not ask you to become less deep. They will ask you to become more honest. That is the difference. You do not need everyone to understand you. You need a few people who are willing to stay long enough to learn your language. And maybe, for the first time, you need to stop treating your depth like a problem to solve. It is not a problem. It is the reason some people will never fully get you. And it is also the reason the right people eventually will. So if this hit a little too close to home, it probably means you have spent years being translated incorrectly by the world around you. But why is it that the people who feel misunderstood the most are often the same people who notice everything? Click the next video on your screen right now to discover the psychology of noticing everything. And why highly observant people often feel like they live a few steps away from everyone else. I'll see you there.